If you have ever thought about starting your own podcast, you should check out Riverside. Riverside is an online recording studio that lets you record podcasts and video in studio quality from anywhere. And if you click on the affiliated link in the episode description and you buy a subscription, you will also be supporting the podcast. And if you're going to start your own podcast or you just want to continue to listen to great podcasts, you need headphones or speakers. If you click on the Amazon affiliated link, you can get great deals on headphones and speakers. And if you make a purchase, it will also help support the podcast. Both links will be in the episode description if you are interested. I want to give a quick content warning in this episode. I briefly talk about some graphic violence. I forgot to give a warning in the episode before I started talking about the violence, but I will leave a timestamp in the episode description, so if you want to skip over that part, you can. History Shelf is not just a podcast that only covers royals, but I have covered some on this podcast. So far, I have covered 1 king and 8 queens, 2 of which have been queens in their own right. To be a queen, you must have a crown and rule a nation. At least, that is what you have to do to technically be a queen. But I feel personally that there is another type of queen, the type that doesn't have a crown, but they have drive and can fight the world's most dangerous men with ease. They don't have a nation, but hundreds of men flock to them for them to lead them. This story is about that type of queen. This story is about a pirate queen. Ahoy! I am Courtney Jewell, and you are listening to the 3rd episode of the 3rd season of History Shelf, a podcast about history that proves that sometimes fact is even more interesting than fiction. 'Tis season 3 of History Shelf, and I have titled this season, Yo Ho, a Pirate's Life for Me. In this season, it'll be all about pirates, the pirates and scallywags that sailed the 7 seas and some rivers, looking for booty as they made their travels. Some of these pirates came from humble beginnings, while others surprisingly came from well-to-do families. But no matter where or who they came from, they all had one thing in common. They would be pirates. And for this week, I am talking about Grace O'Malley. Grace was born Gráinne Ní Mháille. Grace O'Malley is the anglicized version of her name. Ní in the Gaelic language before the clan name means daughter of, and O before the clan name means grandson of. Grace O'Malley was not a name that was used for Gráinne in her lifetime, and so I'm going to call her Gráinne. This is different than last week's episode. If you listened to that episode and you remember, I called Eric of Pomerania Eric for his episode, even though he was named Bogislaw at birth. But why I did that for him was because he went by Eric for most of his life. Gráinne never went by Grace. There is a YouTube channel called History Tea Time with Lindsay Holiday, and she also has a podcast, and she does videos about history. And she did one on Grace O'Malley, and in her video, she called Grace Gráinne. And I liked that. It feels really respectful to call her by the name she went by when she was alive. And so that is what I will be doing for the rest of this episode. Gráinne came from the clan O'Malley. They were a seafaring clan. Gráinne was part of the Gaelic nobility of Ireland. Gráinne was born around 1530 in Connacht, Ireland. Her father was Owen O'Malley, and he was the chief of the clan O'Malley and the Lord of Umhel. Her mother was Margaret. Gráinne was her parents' only child, although one source said that she had a stepbrother, but there's not a lot of information on him. I don't know his name. I don't even know if he came from Gráinne's father remarrying or Gráinne's mother remarrying. As a child, Gráinne spent her days at her family's residence at Clare Island in County Mayo. It is possible that she may have been fostered by another family because that was custom among the Gaelic nobility of Ireland. Both sides of her family were rich, and Gráinne was well educated. She was probably educated by a nearby monastery that was patronized by the O'Malleys. It was probably there where she learned reading, writing, and Latin. She could also speak Gaelic, Spanish, and French. Gráinne was not what you would call a typical girl for her time. The Irish Brehon laws gave women equal rights. They could divorce, there was punishment for rape, a woman was not seen as her husband's property, but rather his partner, but women were still expected to conduct themselves a certain way. Gráinne wanted very much to join her father on a sea voyage, but she was told that the sea was no place for a girl. There are two legends about what happened next. Legend 1. Gráinne hid below deck of her father's ship, and she didn't come up until it was too late to turn back around, and so her father let her stay. Legend 2. Gráinne's father told her that her long red hair would get tangled in the rigging, and because of that she could not go with him. And so Gráinne took a knife and cut off all of her hair. This earned her the nickname Gráinne the Bald, and her father allowed her to come along with him on his trading expedition to Spain. And it was a good thing that her father did allow her to join him at sea, because according to one story, Gráinne saved his life. Owen told his daughter that if their ship was ever attacked, then she had to go and hide below deck. One day, the ship was attacked by English pirates, and she did as her father told her, or at least she tried to. She couldn't because her way was blocked, so she climbed up the rigging. There she watched as her father killed a man, but not before he was wounded. Another pirate saw Owen was wounded and decided to sneak up on him and kill him. Gráinne then jumped down and killed her father's would-be attacker with her own knife. Gráinne would have stayed at sea, but she had to do her duty. She had to marry. Gráinne was 16 in 1546 when she married Donald O'Flaherty. Donald was from the O'Flaherty clan, and he was heir to the chief of Clan O'Flaherty. The O'Flahertys were another seafaring clan, and they were allies of the O'Malleys. So politically, this was a good match. Donald turned out to be a dick, so it was fitting that his nickname was the Cock. One of his favorite pastimes was terrorizing his neighbors. Gráinne had 3 children with Donald. The first one was a son named Owen. Owen was kind. He sounds like the opposite of his father. Her second child was a daughter named Maeve. Maeve was like her mother. Maeve would eventually marry a man named Richard the Devil's Hook Burke. I mention him because he's going to come up a little later on in this story. Her third and last child with Donald was a son named Murrough. Murrough took after his father. Murrough was violent and would often beat his sister Maeve and would not listen to his mother because she was a woman. So he sounds like he was a real gem. Gráinne longed for the sea, and I imagine she longed to get away from her asshole husband and her asshole son Murrough. Gráinne took command of Donald's ships. She sent her sons to be fostered by other clan chiefs. Like I said earlier, this was normal for Gaelic nobles. So her sons went to other clans, but her daughter, Maeve, went with her to sea. I'm sure she probably did this because she remembered what it was like to be a young girl with a desire to sail, and it is said that Maeve was a lot like her mother, so maybe Maeve even asked to go along with her. So Gráinne and Maeve sailed along. Gráinne was good at both legitimate trade and illegal piracy, so she acquired a lot of wealth. She liked to fight with a sword in each hand. She called piracy maintenance by land and sea. Gráinne attacked merchant ships heading to and from Galway. She picked Galway because Galway had refused to do business with her father. Galway then complained to England about Gráinne. Meanwhile, back to Donald for a minute. Donald was in a feud with the clan Joyce over a castle called Castle Kirk, also known as Cox Castle. One day, Donald was out hunting and he was killed by men from the Joyce clan. After they killed him, they headed to Cox Castle, but Gráinne was already there with her men. Gráinne ordered her men to remove all the lead from the roof and melt it down and pour it on the heads of the soldiers below. She then lit a fire beacon to call for reinforcements from the coast to finish them in. From then on, Cox Castle was known as Hen's Castle. Gráinne returned to the O'Flaherty stronghold. She returned to find her place had been stolen. Because Galway had complained to England about Gráinne attacking merchant ships, History Shelf alum Queen Elizabeth I had appointed a minor O'Flaherty cousin as the clan leader. This disinherited Gráinne's two sons. Irish chiefs are elected, but usually the role of chief was passed down from father to son. Gráinne went back to Clare Island, and many O'Flaherty men followed her. Gráinne had obtained a big reputation, and other men from other clans joined her. In 1565, Gráinne was on her way to church when she heard that an English ship had wrecked off Achill Island. So Gráinne skipped church to go to the shipwreck. She fought bad weather to get to the shipwreck, and when she got there, she found loot and a man named Hugh de Lancey. Hugh was a handsome man that was a son of a Wexford merchant, and he was about 10 years younger than Gráinne. Gráinne took the loot and Hugh home with her. Gráinne and Hugh became lovers. It's possible that Gráinne had an illegitimate child with Hugh. Hugh went hunting one day and was murdered by the clan McMahon. So it was just a bad idea to go hunting if you were in a relationship with Gráinne. Gráinne was devastated, but she channeled that and she murdered Hugh's murderers. This is giving me Jeanne de Cleason energy. If you remember, she was the first pirate I covered this season. A lot of Jeanne de Cleason vibes here. I feel like that if Gráinne and Jeanne had been born in the same time in the same place, they for sure would have been BFFs. There is a legend that Gráinne stopped near Dublin, and she went to go pay a friendly visit to Baron Hoth. It is custom that when a chieftain pays a friendly visit on someone, they must show them hospitality. But when Gráinne knocked on the door, she was told that the Baron was at dinner and she was sent away. Gráinne was insulted. On her way home, she just happened to run into the Baron's grandson, and Gráinne kidnapped him and took him back to her ship. The Baron followed her ship and offered Gráinne a chest full of gold for his grandson's safe return. She said that what she wanted was not gold, but hospitality and respect. She then returned the Baron's grandson to him unharmed. Because of this, to this day, the gate of Hoth Castle is left unlocked, and an extra plate is placed at the dining table. In 1566, Gráinne married her second husband, Iron Richard Burke. Iron Richard was just a nickname that he had, but that's what I'm going to refer to him for the rest of this episode because there has already been a Richard in this episode and there's going to be another Richard later on. Iron Richard was the heir to the chief of Clan Burke. Gráinne was about 36 years old at this point. Iron Richard had a castle named Rockfleet. Rockfleet was less exposed than Clare Island, and by this point England had started to enter into Mayo. During Gráinne and Iron Richard's honeymoon, she had her men enter into the castle and she had her ships put in the bay. Then Iron Richard left on business. When he returned, he found a locked gate and Gráinne's men guarding the gate. Gráinne then yelled down from a window, "I divorce you, Iron Richard." To Irish law, that was good enough, because she had told him that she had divorced him. That meant that they were divorced. This reminds me of that movie titled The Thing Called Love. It has River Phoenix and Samantha Mattis in it, and they're trying to make it into country music. And there's this one scene where Samantha Mattis's character goes up to River Phoenix's character, who she is in a relationship with, and she says, "I divorce you, I divorce you, I divorce you." That is what came into my mind when I read that. So, according to Irish law, Gráinne and Iron Richard were divorced. But according to English law, they were still married. And the best part of this little story is Gráinne kept Iron Richard's castle, Rockfleet, and she lived there on and off for the rest of her life. Gráinne and Iron Richard also had a mutually beneficial partnership for the rest of his life, which I think has to be evidence that Gráinne had to have been charismatic, since she divorced him and stole his castle and he still wanted to be her friend. Another factor as to why they continued to have a partnership may have been because after she divorced Iron Richard, she found out that she was pregnant. They had a son named Tibbet together. She gave birth to Tibbet when she was at sea. Gráinne gave birth below deck during a battle with Algerian pirates in the pitch black. Within hours of giving birth to Tibbet, she got up and she joined the fight. At Rockfleet, the staircase that led to Gráinne's bedchamber was narrow, so if someone was going to attack Gráinne, the staircase forced the attacker to hold a sword in their left hand. Going down, you had to use your right hand. So, because more people are right-handed, this gave Gráinne and her men an advantage. This may have been a part of the reason why that Gráinne liked the castle so much, and why she wanted to keep it after she divorced Iron Richard. In her bedroom, there was a narrow window. She kept a long rope out the window. One end of this rope was tied to her favorite galley, and the other was tied to her bedpost, so she would know if someone was trying to steal her favorite ship. Gráinne decided that she had not satisfied her thirst for revenge over the murder of Hugh de Lancey. So she sailed to Blacksoot Bay and stole a ship from the McMahons and also took Doona Castle from them. Again, she is giving me big Jeanne d'Clisson vibes here. This earned her the nickname the Dark Lady of Doona. Stealing from Gráinne was something that she did not take lightly. There was some lord, that stole something from her, and he fled to a church for sanctuary. She told the guy she would wait for him to come out. He dug a tunnel to escape, and the hermit taking care of the church scolded Gráinne for attempting to harm someone. Unfortunately, Gráinne's response to the hermit was not recorded. In 1571, Gráinne helped Iron Richard get elected as the elected successor to the MacWilliam of Mayo, also known as the Mayo Burkes. Gráinne and Richard were like that divorced couple that even though that they are divorced, they still hang out and do everything together. In 1576, Iron Richard's position came under threat because the MacWilliam of Mayo submitted to Queen Elizabeth I. In 1577, an English Lord Deputy named Sir Henry Sidney was putting pressure on the Irish to swear fealty to Elizabeth in exchange for an English barony and a seat in the Irish House of Lords. Gráinne and Iron Richard refused. Henry had Iron Richard voted out as the chief of Clan Burke. Gráinne was furious. Gráinne offered Henry the services of 3 galleys and 200 men if he would restore her family's titles and lands. Henry was impressed with Gráinne. He called her a most feminine sea captain and the most notorious woman in all of the coast of Ireland. But before they could make a deal, Gráinne was captured and put in a Dublin prison. Gráinne was put in prison because she was caught by the Earl of Desmond plundering Desmond, and the Earl put her in Limerick jail and then gave her to the English governor, and he threw her in prison. She spent the next 2 years there. She was finally offered her freedom if she promised to stop being a pirate. Gráinne, of course, agreed, and she, of course, went right back to piracy the second she was released. I honestly can't believe why anyone would believe that she would have kept that promise. In March of 1579, an expedition from Galway attacked Gráinne at her castle at Clare Island, and it did not end well for them. They barely escaped with their lives. Also, in 1579, she plundered English shipping, and so an English army attacked her at Rockfleet, but she defeated them. Then the chief of Clan Burke died, and England backed the chief's son instead of Iron Richard, and the chief's son was elected. So Gráinne and Iron Richard went to battle with the English. The English were no match for Gráinne and Iron Richard. So England made a deal with them. Iron Richard could be chief with an English title as long as he bent the knee to Elizabeth. Iron Richard agreed. Gráinne then became Lady Burke, because remember, under English law, Gráinne and Iron Richard were still married. In dispatches back to London, Iron Richard was called Gráinne's husband, which I love, because how many times has a woman just been called her husband's wife? That still goes on today. In 1583, Iron Richard died of natural causes. Gráinne was entitled to 1/3 of his wealth, and Gráinne seized it before the English could take it. In 1584, a man named Sir Richard Bingham was appointed English governor, and Elizabeth gave him the task to go after Gráinne to bring her to justice. Richard went after Gráinne's sons. He kidnapped Moreau and Tibbet. Then he went to Owen's castle. Owen fed and sheltered him because he didn't know that he had kidnapped his brothers, and you were supposed to show hospitality to your guests. Richard and his men seized Owen and accused him of aiding and abetting rebels. While Owen was tied up, he was stabbed 12 times. The English said that the murder was a failed escape attempt, and they took his castle. But I'm not sure how you can escape while tied up. Gráinne was understandably angry. She hired Scottish mercenaries to help get her sons. Richard told Gráinne to come to his headquarters for a truce. She did, and she found out that it was a trap. She was caught and charged with treason, and she was sentenced to death. As her gallows were being built, Gráinne's son-in-law, Richard the Devilhook Burke, came to her rescue, which, if you were wondering, Richard the Devilhook Burke was Iron Richard's cousin. Devilhook negotiated with the English. He said that he would keep Gráinne under control, as if anyone could keep Gráinne under control. The moment she was released, Gráinne once again returned to the sea. In 1588, when King Philip II of Spain, I have mentioned him a couple of times on this podcast, he was the husband of Queen Mary I of England, and he was a suitor/enemy of Queen Elizabeth I. When he was at war with Elizabeth, Gráinne had helped wrecked Spanish vessels escape to safety. This angered Richard Bingham, and he still had Gráinne's sons, and so he turned Moreau against his mother. Gráinne never spoke to Moreau again, but she would often insult him, and she even leveled Moreau's castle. In 1589, Richard Bingham reported to Elizabeth that Gráinne was guilty of treason. In 1591, Richard destroyed Gráinne's fleet and prepared to execute Tibbet. So Gráinne wrote to Elizabeth and told her everything Richard was doing to her and her family and asked Elizabeth to remove Richard. She said that if Elizabeth removed Richard, then she would offer Elizabeth her pirate services. Elizabeth invited Gráinne to Greenwich Palace. So in 1593, Gráinne put on her best gown and she had a face-to-face meeting with Elizabeth. When she arrived there, she was searched and a dagger was found on her. The court was scared, but Gráinne said that it was for her own protection, and Elizabeth said it was okay. Gráinne refused to bow to Elizabeth because she said that they were both queens. I love it. I love this boldness, and I would have loved to have been in the room to have seen this. Gráinne sneezed during their meeting, and she was given a handkerchief from a noblewoman. And Gráinne blew her nose, and then she threw it into the fireplace. This shocked the court. Gráinne then explained that in Ireland, dirty handkerchiefs are destroyed. Elizabeth was fascinated with Gráinne. She granted Gráinne's requests to have her son Tibbet freed and have his lands restored. And Gráinne could continue to be a pirate under the English crown. Gráinne got 3 galleys and 300 men from Elizabeth. But Elizabeth did not remove Richard, but she wrote a letter telling him to leave Gráinne alone, and she let Gráinne personally hand him the letter. I would have loved to have seen his face as he read the letter. I have mentioned a lot of assholes on this podcast, but not always has karma come back around to them. So that is nice to see. I'm sure Gráinne got some pleasure delivering that letter to the man that kidnapped 2 of her sons, turned one of those sons against her, threatened the other kidnapped son with execution, and killed the one son that he did not kidnap. Richard didn't understand what Elizabeth meant when she told him to leave Gráinne the hell alone, and he spied on Gráinne. From May 1593 to March 30th, 1603, the 9 Years' War, also known as Tyrone's Rebellion, took place in Ireland. England kept pushing into Ireland and trying to gain more control over it. This led to the Irish fighting back. This rebellion was led by Hugh O'Neill and Hugh Roe O'Donnell. I'm not going to get too much into the 9 Years' War here because I have already covered the whole thing in Queen Elizabeth I's episode, so if you want to learn more about it, you can listen to that episode. During the 9 Years' War, Gráinne took England's side, and she encouraged her son Tibbet to fight for England. In 1595, Richard had ordered Gráinne, even though he was supposed to leave her alone, to house a large number of English soldiers, so many that it was putting a strain on her financially. Gráinne then complained to Elizabeth, and Richard was finally removed. Gráinne is reported to have been a pirate even at the age of 67. There is a recorded attack of her attacking MacNeil of Barra off the coast of Scotland in 1597, which, kudos to her. I am 32 years old, and I don't think that I could physically be able to be a pirate right now. Gráinne continued to be a pirate until the Battle of Kinsale in the 9 Years' War in 1601. That really put an end to what the Gaelic culture was, and Gráinne probably died in 1603, the same year as Elizabeth, and she probably died at Rockfleet, and she is probably buried on Clare Island. Gráinne's cultural impact has been big. The following songs, plays, and books that I'm about to list that have been written about her are just the ones that can be found on her Wikipedia page, but I know for a fact there has been at least more songs that have been written about her because I found them on TikTok, which if you haven't followed the podcast on TikTok yet, come follow. It's at History Shelf. So these are just the songs that are listed on Wikipedia. I'm not going to get into the songs that I found on TikTok because that would take a while, and I'm sure there's even more. Okay, these are the following songs. Granuel by the Indulgers, Return of the Sea King by Dead Can Dance, Granuel, Queen of Pirates by Gavin Dunn, Grace O'Malley by the Dreadnoughts, Granuel by Frantic Amber, and Pirate Grace O'Malley by Rocking Ron, the Friendly Pirate Ron Carter. Patrick Pearse used Gráinne as a symbol in his song Oh Welcome Home. Sean Davey composed music about her life called Granuel. And the song Rule 23, Birds of a Feather by Fish in a Birdcage is inspired by Gráinne. These are the plays that have been listed on Gráinne's Wikipedia page that are about her. Bald Grace by Marky Shallow, A Most Notorious Woman by Molly Lyons, Gráinne by J. Costello, K. Doyle, L. Arity, and A. L. Machica. A Most Notorious Woman Tales of Grace O'Malley by Maggie Cronin, and the musical The Pirate Queen, yet another musical about a person that I have covered on this podcast. I'm not sure what this brings the total to, but it is much higher than what I thought I would get to when I started this podcast. These are the books that have been written about Gráinne. Gráinne, Sea King of the Irish Seas by Morgan Llewellyn. Gráinne, Hero of the Irish by Siobhan Parkinson. And she is a character in the books Finnegan's Wake by James Joyce, The Rise and Fall of D.O.D.O. by Neil Stevenson and Nicole Gowan, and Flint and Mirror by John Crawley. There is a statue of Gráinne in Westport House in County Mayo. Westport House is a country house. There is also a bronze statue on the grounds near the house, and in the house there is also a comprehensive exhibition on Gráinne. In Chicago, Illinois, in the United States, there is a statue of Gráinne outside Old St. Pat's Church. Since 1948, the Commissioners of Irish Lights have sailed 3 vessels named Granuel, and in Tampa, Florida, in the United States, Gráinne is the inspiration for Ye Loyal Crew of Grace O'Malley, one of the many crews that participate in the Gasparillo Pirate Festival. And of course, Gráinne has become a figure in Irish folklore. And that was the life of Grace O'Malley, or what she would be called in her day, Gráinne Ní Mháille. Thank you so much for listening to the 3rd episode of the 3rd season of History Shelf. There are 15 episodes planned for this season. Next week's episode is going to be about Zheng Qinggong. I hope you come back for that. A few things before we go. If you want to follow this podcast on social media, the TikTok is at History Shelf. The Twitter is at History Shelf Pod. The Instagram is at history_shelf_pod, and the Facebook is History Shelf Podcast. If you want to help out this podcast financially, there are a few ways you can do that. One is you can buy merch from the History Shelf merch store. You can also become a Patreon. This podcast is always going to be free, but there are some perks that come along with becoming a Patreon. The first tier is called History Student, and that is $1 a month. And with that, I will send out a thank you to you on social media, on all of the platforms that History Shelf is on. And I will also, for every episode that I do, I will choose one Patreon at random and give them a shout out at the end of an episode. The second tier is called History Fan, and that is $3 a month. And with that, you get the first tier, plus you get to vote in a poll that helps me choose the theme for the next season of this podcast. The third tier is called History Buff, and that is $20 a month. And with that, you get the first 2 tiers, plus you will get a handwritten note of thanks mailed to you from me. And the last tier is called History Lover, and that is $40 a month. And with that, you get the first 3 tiers, plus you get to choose one item from the History Shelf merch store. Also, you can take out ad space on this podcast. I have a gig on Fiverr. Or you can click on one of the affiliated links. There's one for Riverside and there's one for Amazon. If you click on one of those links and you buy something, that also helps out the podcast. But if you don't want any of the merch and you don't want any of the perks and you don't want to buy anything, but you still want to help out the podcast financially, I have turned on listener support on Spotify for podcasters. The links to everything that I just mentioned will be in the episode description for this episode. One more thing before we go. If you are listening to me on Stitcher, which I know a lot of you are, 29% of you listen to me on Stitcher. I don't know if you know this or not, but Stitcher soon will be shut down. Come August 29th, 2023, Stitcher will be no more. So you will need to find another platform to listen to History Shelf and the rest of your podcasts, which I am on all of the platforms. All right. So until next time, keep learning, keep loving history, and come back for next week's episode. Bye.